through the Viper wall, and it covers, I don't know, sometimes like maybe like 4 angles, so it kind of counts as 4 smokes, and then you put it up and down, and then you put it up and down, and then you put it up and down. That's 12 smokes. I was like, 12 smokes. Brimstone has 1, 2. Wait a second.
I will refuse to watch T1 for any game they play. Even if they get to the Champs Grand Final, I will not watch it.
Why is TenZ still playing?
TenZ is still playing because Sentinels still want to be the most popular role.
Wow, you just came out and said it directly like that. Hello and welcome to Cosmic Divide episode 15, the number 2 Valorant podcast in the world. My name is Elevated. I'm joined by TMV, and I got a couple things that I want to address right off the bat. First of all, in the last episode of PLATCHAT, maybe it was the second to last episode of PLATCHAT, they were talking about how they were the only podcast out there that talks about Valorant, and that was a little offensive. I mean, not that they would watch the number 2 podcast. Why would you, as the number 1 podcast? But speaking of number 1 things, the American flag on your shoulder, my friend. Number 1 country in the world. Thank you for representing us. God bless.
Yeah, this is something that Americans really, this really grinds my gears. That Americans love their flag. Their flag, this flag, I'm just going to put it out there to you Americans, like,
Careful.
It's an awful flag. Like, it's a really, really bad, like, messy, cluttered flag. Like, there are many, many better flags that they could have used or should have used. They should have just stuck with the initial 13. Like, who is ever, when you're a kid, tell me this in school, when you're a kid, and if you ever had to draw the flag, did you actually have to sit there and draw all 50 stars?
Yeah.
That is tedious, and that doesn't make any sense. And
it's just star drawing practice, you know, repetition. And also, America is a messy, chaotic country. It's a melting pot. So the flag represents the culture. Touche.
Yeah, who cares? Anyway, let's move on and talk about actual things that need to be talked about. We're gonna start off with I just want one word.
This
one
is an
word
awful
answer.
Transition, by the way. TMV.
Yeah, I don't care. One word answer for this question. The first question of the podcast. Will evil geniuses be in VCT 2024?
One word?
That's already 2, but yes, go on.
I hope not.
Well, that was 3.
No, it was one word. There's no spaces in that. I hope not.
Okay, my answer is actually going to be, I'm going to surprise everyone. I'm going to say yes. And we're just going to leave it at that. I think they will be. But anyway, that's just my opinion. But yeah, maybe EG won't be, and then we'll have more chaos on our hands. It's been a rough year for Riot, like VCT Valorant decisions in North America, hasn't it? Already with 2 of them.
I definitely don't envy the people that are in charge of the esports scene right now. Like,
yeah,
you know, granted, they've definitely made quite a few mistakes, but I wouldn't say that their job has been easy thus far.
No.
Either.
Yeah, I honestly legitimately think there is no way they ever envisaged like a team not signing the Ascension document after winning.
Yeah.
I bet they thought there's literally no way. I bet they didn't even think about that as a possibility that like could even happen. That someone would just not want to join. And that's already happened to them. And now one of the teams that they picked for partnership might just completely dissolve. So yeah, hasn't been a great start. Particularly in the Americas. But we shall move on. And we shall move on to the new league that will be forming. And we don't know the teams yet. Although by the time that this comes out, who knows? Maybe you will know the teams because it's probably coming out in the next couple weeks, most likely.
Yeah, I would think
so. And that is the teams for the Chinese Valorant League. And that they've had tournaments going on. What have you thought of what you have seen?
So I mean, first of all, I guess I don't really understand what the whole system was. They had like a series of 3 tournaments over the last 6 months. I think it's kind of been going on, maybe a little bit less than that.
Yeah,
but they had like 3 acts, and each one had like qualifiers, and it's been a very, very long, grueling process for the Chinese players to kind of like, I guess, sort of like audition themselves maybe for Riot at this point, and like. I don't really even understand why they did all of these tournaments.
So the reason that they did these tournaments was to figure out who will go to the Ascension tournament for China, which is happening in mid-December.
Right, but
So
what
the
are they
Chinese league
ascending
will.
to? Because there's not even a league yet to ascend
Yeah, well,
to.
this is the thing. I think the reason that they've done it like this is probably that when they first started the first tournament, they didn't know who the 10 teams were going to be.
Mhm.
And so they had to put everyone in there
Right.
because they didn't know who the 10 teams were going to be. And then it's like, well, you kind of have to keep everyone in because otherwise that's just revealing, like,
Yeah.
randomly 6 teams on in this one that were in the last one. Like, oh, EDG on in it. Oh, I wonder why. Like,
Yeah.
so they just kept everyone in it. And the way it's going to work is everyone has gotten a certain amount of points from where they finished in those tournaments. The 10 teams who are in partnership, it doesn't really mean anything for. But the 10 teams who aren't, they will then qualify for the Chinese Ascension tournament, whoever the top 10 in points is. And then the winner will be the Ascension team for China, who will have 11. It would be so funny if China gets 11 teams, but America's still only has 10. I mean, that would be quite the miracle that they've gone through all of this during this time, and they're still going to have potentially one more team and the correct amount of teams in it, and America still can't manage it.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up the point standings real quick. We're gonna do something crazy on Cosmic Divide. We're gonna have other screens. It's gonna be really scuffed because I don't have this set up in the scenes in OBS. But here we go, covering your face. I'm gonna zoom in on this a little bit, and we can you can't see it, so I'm just gonna read it to you. We have Edward Gaming at 1,725 points is number one. Rare Atom at 1,095 points. Trace Esports in third place. OnePlus Phoenix in fourth, Attacking Soul Esports in fifth, followed by Billy Gaming, Royal Never Give Up, Dragon Ranger Gaming, Tai Lu, Top Esports, Titan Esports Club, and I believe, how many is that? Getting close to 10 here. Ninjas in Pajamas, Weibo Gaming, 17 Gaming are on the screen as well. Back to the Cosmic Divide. Look at that production value, TMV.
I'm back.
How much of these games did you watch?
I had watched actually a decent amount, particularly during like not as much of the last one, but like when the other two first ones were going on, there really was no other Valorant to watch, and I was just interested in kind of what teams were playing on Sunset. This was kind of the only official games of like Sunset that were going on for a while.
Right.
How a few teams approaching the new Breeze, that kind of stuff. So particularly earlier on, I was watching quite a bit of it. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because there are some teams that we are somewhat familiar. Obviously, EDG, everyone knows, right? But obviously, there have been other teams like FPX, Attacking Soul, Billy, who had been to these other international tournaments that we maybe had like some kind of general vague idea of like where they were, how good they might be, right? Even if they had made like a couple roster moves or whatever, you got the kind of general vibe of their team. And like those 3 teams finished in 4th, 5th, 6th across all of the tournaments. So kind of interesting, and kind of shows that like, yeah, there's EDG like who won all 3 tournaments. They're way out at the top. And then you've got kind of this mix of like probably a good 5-6 teams who are kind of close, like, who are kind of like maybe at any one given time, like the second best Chinese team. So, and I would assume that, a fair amount of those orgs, will be in the partnership system because, some of them seem like,
well, here's the thing.
here
So
we go.
obviously EDG is getting in. They're a
Yeah.
massive org. They won every tournament in China. Everybody knows them. Of course they're getting in. FPX, also a fairly large org, certainly not an EDG scale, but they're kind of like a legacy Chinese org at this point. They've been to a couple international tournaments. They finished 3rd overall in this one and pretty high up in points. Rare Atom is not that big of an org. Trace Esports is not that big of an org. Attacking Soul Esports, not that big of an org. Titan Esports, Dragon Ranger Gaming, Top Esports, none of these are that big. But then when you go a little bit lower in the standings, 17 Gaming, pretty big org. LGD, massive org. Billy, of course. Royal Never Give Up, RNG, pretty big org also. There's definitely some players out there that did not do that well in this tournament and maybe don't even have that good of a team. So I could definitely see a situation where some of these orgs like an LGD or a 17 gets into the actual league and then has to try and pick up the players from like a Trace Esports or an Attacking Soul, which are clearly better players as proven through these tournaments. So it could get very chaotic in China.
Yeah, it could, and it might even happen where, like, let's take Rare Atom as our example, who were the second best team in terms of the overall standings. Like, if they didn't make it in, then they obviously would be in the Ascension tournament, and then you would assume that like they might be thinking, well, we've got the best team,
Right.
in this Ascension. You take EDG out, we got the best team, so we'll just, this team, like, hey guys, we'll win this tournament. Don't worry about it. We are good enough to win this. Like, just stick with us, and we'll be there for 2 years anyway. Like, nothing will have changed essentially.
Right.
So that's a possibility as well. Like, so yeah, we could see a lot of like, chaos. Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be chaotic because the time frame is so small, right? From when, like, all of this is going to get announced, and then the Ascension team and whoever makes it in, like, it could get, pretty messy, I guess, in China. And obviously, even if you do make roster changes, by the time obviously the real kind of VCT season starts, if you do make roster changes, then you wouldn't have had that much time to, actually practice with that team. Like, you're looking at like, you're basically getting EG'd.
Right.
If you're an NRG or 100 Thieves, that's basically what's going to happen to you if you do make a roster change.
Right, but I mean, granted, I assume that a lot of these orgs already know that they're in. It's like I'm sure that there's been talks for a while at this point, and so there probably are even contracts or offers or buyouts already in place, or at least kind of like starting to happen for some of these teams that need players from orgs that are like maybe not going to get in partnership. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to watch. My question for you is, what do you think of the overall talent pool in China? Like, how would you sort of compare, let's say, like the top 6 or so teams from these Chinese tournaments versus like the top 6 in any of the other international leagues?
I definitely think that, honestly, I feel like with Chinese Valorant right now, it's more so that it's just less refined, I guess. There's just less of a like consistency there. Sometimes these, like from the maps that I watched, and I did watch a lot of games, without EDG as well, right? So I watched a lot of these kind of like, second versus fourth, or like fifth versus seventh, like those kind of games. Like, you'll see them do stuff that is like good. You'll see them play like a good round, and you'll be like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. And then that very next round, they will do something that you're like, I haven't seen someone make that big of a mistake since 2021. Like, that is what it feels like. Like, just there's some rounds that are so baffling that like legitimately make you go like, what did I just watch? But then at the same time, then someone will do like have some incredible like crazy aim shots. And you're just like, oh my god, like that's crazy. Or someone will have like a really cool util combo. It feels like China is just more chaotic. Like, I feel like each of the 3 leagues as well, with America's EMEA and Pacific, like they all have a kind of style to them. They all have kind of a a kind of theme about them that you can kind of go like, oh, this is how the 3 leagues are different. I feel like with China, it's more just random. They're like some teams play super fast, some teams might play super
scrappy,
slow. Yeah, like everything is just, there is no theme. It's just still a big bubbling pot of just who knows what's going on. And even like, and I think that that's represented by EDG as well, right? The best Chinese team has moments where you go, wow, that was incredible. But they also do a lot of stuff that is like, what are you doing? Why are you throwing so hard? Your decisions don't make any sense. Like, that's what Chinese Valorant is. And so I don't think they would compare favorably right now with any of the other top 6 of either of the leagues. But I mean, I'm on this train, and I think most people are probably on this train, that give it 2 years and we'll say the opposite. And it'll probably be everyone is behind the top 6 in China, most likely.
Yeah, I want to focus in on a couple of things that you mentioned there, because from my takeaway, I didn't watch really very much of the first 2 of this series of tournaments. I watched some of like the early Sunset and stuff in like, I think Act 1. I don't think I watched any of Act 2, but I watched most of the games in this one. And I was pretty blown away by the average overall like individual mechanical skill of the Chinese players. I would say maybe the Chinese league on average has better aimers than any other international league. And like specifically just kind of like first bullet accuracy, the guys with like the Sheriffs, the Guardians, Vandal, One Tap, like very, very, very skilled aimers. And certainly the game plans, sometimes good, sometimes bad, certainly chaotic, sometimes losing like the thread seemingly in the middle of the round and then just relying on pure mechanics to shoot your way out of it. But I will say that they also seem to not be afraid to kind of like pave their own way. Granted, a lot of them are playing fairly meta comps in a lot of situations, but they're doing interesting stuff. Like they'll play a meta comp, but then they'll use utility in a different way than people are doing standard. Like there's like a, the standard Viper wall. FPX stands out to me. They're like the standard Viper wall in Lotus where it cuts off A. And then FPX is like, hey, we're just going to throw the exact same Viper wall on defense back at you. So we have control over when this is like going up and down. We have control of the sightlines now. And it actually worked quite well when they were using that. And then obviously, you've got EDG playing like Neon on Breeze, and there's lots of teams playing Gecko, and there's just cool stuff happening in Chinese Valorant, which makes me very excited because for the love of God, somebody needs to be innovating in this game, and none of the other leagues are really doing it outside of like literally just PaperRex.
Yeah, I think part of my answer to that question as well was probably because probably with EDG, I watched a similar amount of FPX, and they were probably like way ahead in terms of being the second most like team that I watched of these games, because I just find them a fascinating team.
Yeah,
because
seriously.
They pick their comps out of a hat. Like it seems like a lot of the time, like just straight up, who knows what they'll play this time. And sometimes they'll do something and it's like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, oh, what an interesting like way of thinking about the game. Sometimes though, they'll play a comp and it might be an interesting comp, and you might like be able to go like, oh yeah, I could see how this will work. And they just like won't use like what the comp is good at. Like they'll just do the opposite of what you would think that they might do, right? They might play no duelist and just run it down into a choke point like every attack round. It's like, what? But I so they're kind of like they're fascinating to just watch and just observe to see like, do they know what they're doing, or have they like, it feels like their like philosophy of approaching the game is just like surprise your opponent. If we don't know what we're doing, they can't know what we're doing. Like it feels like that's how they play. And it does create a sense of like of mystifying like what is going on. But yeah, it is kind of more fun to watch probably for people like us who watch quite a lot of Pro Valorant, because you do get very bored of oh look, everyone's playing the meta comp, and oh look, a Silver Dart I've seen a million times before, and oh look, a Flash I've seen a million times before. Yeah, that does get a bit dull.
Two last little points that I wanted to talk about are the amount of imports was surprising to me. Like usually when I look at a Chinese team in any other esport, it's just all Chinese players with some like Taiwanese and some like Hong Kong flags next to their names, and like that's basically it. Maybe like a Malaysian player here or there, just because like language barrier is a pretty big thing. But there's like quite a few Koreans. There's like a decent amount of Australian players. There's like some Russians. There's like, they're kind of like all over the place as far as like composition of ethnicities and like, I mean, I assume they're probably mostly calming in Chinese, but I wonder if any of them are calming in English, just because there's like,
I know that for Autumn on FPX that they do comment in like some English because and they comment like some Mandarin, and apparently Autumn can speak some Mandarin. So it's like a kind of hybrid blend. So yeah, it's maybe that's how most teams are doing it. Like you just kind of blend the two. But yeah, I would assume it's still mostly Mandarin, and then if you can't speak Mandarin, just figure it out.
Right. And okay, and then the last point that I wanted to make before we move on from China is Bilibili Gaming.
Yes.
What were your thoughts about them in this last act, and what's their future? I guess at this point, they're the team that slayed NRG. They kicked FNS out of VCT by beating him twice. He's no longer playing professionally at this point. It was Bilibili Gaming's fault. And when I watched them play, they looked pretty terrible.
I mean, yeah. So they got eliminated in this last one. What, like literally, kind of almost as soon as they could.
12th, yeah.
Yeah, like so. That's not great. And as you say, like going from where they were, I mean, they did. As I said, I kind of watched more of the first couple ones where they didn't do that bad. You know, they were kind of like okay, but they, you know, you would expect for a team that went to champs, beat NRG, you know, that they would kind of
Kept
from
the
there
same
kick
roster.
on. Yeah, kept the same roster. Like you'd expect that they would probably be like, you know, at least third, right? Overall in the standings. So yeah, that is definitely a bit of a worry. I can't say that I watched, you know, the most recent games, the ones that they were losing, but you know that they're losing to a team who's playing like ISO and Reina. So yeah, that's not great. In fact, I did watch this game because it was the ISO game.
The
So
ISO game,
I lied to you. I did watch this game because they played ISO, their opponents. And yeah, I can't say I was focusing on BLG because obviously I was focusing on the ISO. But yeah, it didn't look amazing. And who knows? Maybe that's again just a showcase of like how close everyone is. Kind of, you know, maybe it just means that, you know, from second to like, you know, 10th actually is, you know, fairly close in China, or it means that BLG just, you know, took a massive dump.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me they looked a little stagnant. Like they're still just doing the same stuff that they were doing. They haven't really evolved, whereas a lot of the other Chinese teams seem to be kind of like doing interesting stuff.
Yep. Anyway, let's move on. Next topic. Game Changers Championship. However, the Game Changers Championship starts tomorrow. This episode won't come out tomorrow, I wouldn't have thought.
Probably
So
not. So yeah.
that means that if we did a full Game Changers Championship preview, we'd be talking about it because we don't know what's happened. But if you're watching this, you probably will know at least some of what's happened. So that doesn't really make any sense to do. So instead, we're just going to very quickly, potentially timed, do a bracket of who we think will win.
Well, first before we do that,
Go on.
I'm going to be honest. I haven't watched very much of the games leading up to this. I know that you've kind of been in the VOD dungeon studying Game Changers a bit.
Have, yes.
So I would like you to educate me on what I should be looking forward to. I've basically only watched the EMEA stuff because obviously I was helping out the Ascend Rising team. So I know BBL Queens, I know GT Gozen, and then I've seen a bit of Shopify, and that's basically it.
Okay. EG lost their best player.
Yep.
Did look fairly good, I would say. You know, if they had their best player, they probably would be actually up there in terms of the favorites, I would think. But without their best player, definitely not going to be easy for them. Also, Riot made a weird ruling where they couldn't pick up a player from anyone who finished in the top 8, which I don't really get, but
right. They just had to kind of grab like a free agent person, right?
Yeah, so they just had to grab basically anyone they could find. And yeah, don't know how that will go. Kind of a big nerf. Who knows what to expect with them. SMG are the APAC team, but they don't really play like, you know, your classic APAC crazy style. They're more kind of a more standard team, to be honest. They haven't lost a game in 2023. They absolutely destroy most teams that they've played so far. I don't know if that speaks to how good they are or how bad the rest of the region is. Don't know. But overall, in terms of what they looked like, I would say actually they looked pretty good. I like some of their ideas. They seemed fairly solid. So I think they're not too bad. Team Liquid Brazil. If you watched last year's Game Changers Championship, they were in it. They have made some changes. Their firepower is good. I actually really didn't like some of the things that I saw from them. Just like not using util like as a team, like kind of, you know, oh, I'm dashing in on my own as like a jet. But you know, the flash isn't there with it, or you know, something's late. Util might be late. It's not always. Sometimes they can like when they are playing together as a team, like it's really good because they have really good players and it's going well if they can get that going. But it feels too inconsistent for me. G2, you know, they've got two different players than they had from last year's winning team. Probably not quite on the same level, but still good and have more experience than everyone else. So Who knows?
Yeah, they're definitely a good team. I mean, I can talk about them a little bit just because I had to anti-strat them during the bracket a bit. I would say that, I mean, really, they are a team that is pretty heavily carried by like Mimi's performance at this point. Like Mimi and
Petra, I think. Yeah.
Petra, the core of
two.
Mimi, Petra, Glance is, you can tell that they are like, they're winners. And I would say that Sarah seemed very inconsistent in the games that I watched and when we played her. Certainly talented, but definitely a player that could just kind of disappear in the server. So kind of a big nerf from having Mary, who was just like destroying everyone last year. And then, I mean, Roxy's just a solid player as well. But I really think this is kind of like, if Mimi and Glance and Petra can really step up, then they really are a dangerous team just because of that experience and defending their title and that kind of stuff. But I would say their chances of winning are pretty rough this year.
Yeah. BBL as well, obviously, I think Vania might be the best player.
This team is very interesting. Like, they are insane individually, mechanically. Like, actually, I remember watching the games and just being like afraid of when we would take duels against them, because it would just feel like, well, it's just one taps. Like, it's every aim duel, it feels like you're fighting like a Demon 1 level player, like comparatively. And we would have the strats on them because strategically this team is extremely one-dimensional. It's like, we're running it down, we're going as fast as possible, we're winning all of our aim duels, and if you can't stop that, then you're going to lose the game. And even if you can stop that, there's a very good chance that Wenz or somebody lurking on the other side of the map is going to kill 4 of you, just because you're going to take like a 2v1 against her. She's going to one-tap both of you, then she's going to win 2 more 1v1s, and you're just going to lose the round. So this is a team I feel like that will run several teams over at this event, but then once they go up against a team that can equal them or be close to them in firepower, that is where the struggles could potentially happen.
Yeah, I kind of agree, to be honest. But I also think it's a possibility that maybe they just don't run into that team. Maybe they just do out. They are insane individually. And then Crew Blaze, again, they dominate their region. Difficult to know. Didn't think they were super impressive personally. But I mean, they're destroying their region, so it's like, who knows. Then EDG, very interesting team.
Really?
Very interesting. They approach their attack side like Koi, like old guild Koi, Barbar, like sit in
you
spawn.
You do not like that, do you?
Sit in spawn for the first 30 seconds, and just go from there. Now, I'm not a great fan of it. I'll be honest. No, but well, actually, I say that for a team like Koi, that's how they approach everything, right? Everything is passive about the way they approach the game. Which again isn't for me. It's not my style, but fine, whatever, right? For EDG, and I don't know enough about their scene to say. I'm just going to guess that came about as a response to other teams just charging out at them. I just feel like it probably is the case, because on defense side, it's not, they do some crazy stuff, crazy aggressive stuff on the defense side. So I don't think it's like just their philosophy is be super passive. I think it's more so likely a response to, hey, these teams just keep pushing out at us. Let's just play super passive to start and see if they push out at us. But they have they had multiple, while if you watch their grand final, the qualifier against ZETA, they had multiple rounds where they're just like 5 stacking on gun rounds on one defensive like site on gun rounds. Like they are like that, so they are crazy at times. Very interesting team. I was actually fairly impressed. I don't think they'll be like, I wouldn't expect them to finish in like the top 3, but I think they will be competitive at the very least, and they'll like give teams a game. Problem is though, as well, they're gonna have a sub, so.
Oh, really?
So yeah, it's like, who knows? One of their players,
and
I think,
they're starting
has health.
against Shopify, which is rough.
Yeah, one of their players has health issues, I think, so that might be a bit rough. And then you got Shopify, who you're probably somewhat aware of.
Yeah.
Who you have, I mean, again, probably the best player most people would guess, I guess, in Flow. Obviously, Mel, most people are probably aware of. And yeah, they're just pretty good. To me, their problem is that they don't like the dial of aggressive versus passive. It feels like when things aren't going well, they don't know which way to swing the dial, and they go too far passive or too far aggressive, and they can't find the right middle range. Like if you watch their game against EG, there's just multiple times where you've got multiple people just being way too aggressive, like as individuals or as a team. Like just it's like, hey, you're in a 5v3. Why do we need to, push really deep here? Why not just chill? And then there's other times where it's like, hey, you got a 5v5 retake on bind. Why, like, we've got access to any post plant we want. Why are we all just retreating like miles off the site? Like
Gotcha.
there's multiple of those instances where it's a bit strange, but they are obviously very, very good. So do you want to do a quick
a hyper time bracket?
Yeah, hyper time bracket. I don't know if
Okay.
you have the technology to pull it up again above my face, but
I believe I can. Give me 1 second. Yep. Go. Doing a very, very smooth transition. Go like this. And boom. Oh, that's my face. Okay.
yeah, cover yours. That's fine.
Okay, cool. So here we have our bracket. We've got EG. Okay, let's put like a minute on the timer. EG versus SMG. Who you taking?
I'm going SMG.
All right, we'll go SMG. Liquid versus G2 Gozen.
I kind of want to go G2.
I'm down for it. Let's go. Okay, BBL Queens versus Crew Blaze. I'm picking the Queens. Simply because of the name, BBL Queens. I mean, how crazy a name is that, first of all, but also crazy players.
And then I'll go SR.
Okay. Upper semifinals, SMG, G2.
I'm going to go... Oh... I'm going to go... You know G2. You guess. Just guess.
I'm going to go G2, honestly, because I think if they beat a team like Liquid, they're probably going to beat an SMG team.
That's a fair point. Okay. And I will say that I think
we got like
this
15
might
seconds left here.
Oh, I saw.
Okay. Lower round 1, EG Liquid.
Liquid.
Okay. Crew Blaze.
EDG.
Okay. BBL. I'm taking them.
Yeah, sure. BBL. And then SMG.
SMG. Okay.
And
upper
then,
final.
SR.
Cool.
And BBL.
BBL.
And BBL again.
BBL.
And BBL win it.
BBL win it. Submit the pick'em. Was probably over a minute, but this is the correct bracket. Come back to this podcast and you'll see for sure. Okay, transitioning out of this. Boom and boom. Look at that technology. Kurt, who needs him on PLATCHAT? We've got me. We've got me over here. Okay, any last storylines or anything you want to talk about GC champs before we move on?
Just congratulations to BBL. That's all I've got to say, really.
Calling it for the Turkish aim. Let's go. I mean, I'll take that one, because if BBL wins it all, that means that Acend Rising was the second best team in the world. So let's go.
Yeah, that's the way to see it. Okay, next thing we're going to talk about is another tournament that's happening, but with less stakes. AfreecaTV.
But here's the thing. So I think so far in the off season, I mean, we've kind of lamented the off season offerings so far. There's been a lot of show matches. I personally could not care any less about those. I really just do not care about the show matches. I think they're boring because I'm a pure esports fan. I don't care about the influencers. I don't care about the memes. I just want to see good Valorant. Maybe that makes me a freak. It probably does, but I'm going to be honest. If I had to watch a Tarek Ludwig couch stream or some super obscure like tier 2 Chinese Valorant game where they're playing as hard as possible, I'm probably picking the Chinese Valorant game. So that being said, this is kind of the first LAN that, I mean, maybe that's discounting like the Red Bull one.
Yeah, Red Bull was the first, I think, but yeah.
Okay, so this is like the second, but this is a little bit more global because we've got Sentinels, PaperRex, FullSense, DRX, Fancy United, which is Filipino team. No,
Vietnamese.
Fancy Vietnamese. Apologies. Liquid is going to be there. T1 Edward Gaming is going to be there. So we've got representatives from all of the leagues, which makes this one kind of interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, Fancy United. Of all the teams to start with, I'm going to start with my favorite team of this lot, which is Fancy United. Fancy United they're like the FPX of the rest of the world.
Okay.
They're crazy, but I actually really like some of their ideas. I actually think of all the teams, I am interested to see what they do because I think that they do some very interesting things. They play weird comps and they do stuff that is interesting. So I kind of like them. I think if you elevated aren't familiar with Fancy United, you should get familiar with them because I think they're your kind of team where they'll do different stuff to what everyone else is doing.
I'll be watching this. I'm just going to read a couple of their comps just so people have a little bit of context. Haven comp that they played somewhat recently. Omen, Viper, Gecko, Cypher, Phoenix. Ascent comp, Omen, Viper, Fade, Gecko, Phoenix. They seem to like the Gecko and the Phoenix combo, which is really interesting. Bind, they're playing Sky Breach, Raze, Viper, Omen. That's pretty interesting and spicy too. Okay, yeah, I can get on board with some of this.
Yeah,
and they're going to go up against Liquid
Breach,
in the
they're
first
playing
round.
Cypher.
Yep.
I mean, they're playing Breach and Viper, which is a combo you don't often see either. So yeah, they're definitely an interesting team in terms of their comps. But let's actually talk about some of the teams that maybe people are more familiar with.
You want to go matchup by matchup and talk about them?
Yeah, we could do. I suppose that makes sense. So yeah, we got Sentinels against PaperRex, which is an absolute giga banger, really, in terms of the clout. Like many analysis video will be made about this one, I'm sure, because people even if it was the most fucking boring game that's ever been played. Views people
YouTube.
Need those views, so this is a great game to do it. Let's start with Sentinels, shall we? We've seen Sentinels play in some of those show matches that you hate so much. And do we know who's actually going to be playing in this game?
Yeah, do we know that's like the first story, right? Is that Zellsis has probably played more games than Pencata so far in the offseason. And some speculation was that he was the one that was practicing leading up to this one with the team, and Pencata was not. So right off the bat, let's start with getting into the drama. How do you feel about this? Who would you personally put in as the coach of Sentinels? And what's going on with America's and the world's favorite team?
Oh, God. What would I do as the coach? If I was the coach, I would have access to all the information. So I would probably make a much more informed decision than I have with the information that I have available. If I'm being honest, like Pencata is obviously probably like a slightly better individual than Zellsis. Personally, I don't think the gap is that big.
Are we talking like pure mechanics?
Yeah, like in terms of like just playing Valorant, like how you are as just like a pure Valorant player, like not even in a pro setting, just aim and stuff like that. I think most people would agree Pencata is probably a better player, but
honestly, I don't even know if that's true. Like, if you're just talking about like pure Valorant players, I would almost say that Zellsis is a better player overall because he's flexible and brings a lot more energy and comms and everything else that you want out of a player.
Okay, well, I was approaching this with caution. I'm glad that you agree because I feel like most people are very heavy on the Pencata is a better player than Zellsis train, and I don't know. Like, I think it's negligible. I think it's like they're probably pretty close. And I know that that's going to sound weird and people are going to say, but Pencata won, champs with Loud or whatever. And he was probably, the MVP of that tournament or whatever. And that is somewhat true. But I always thought for the rest of his time on Loud, like Pencata was a good smokes player, but not often the reason that Loud was, one of the best teams in the world. Well, at least he was on that team. And then since joining Sentinels, he obviously got forced onto a role that, he wasn't super familiar with, but, he wasn't great. Let's be real.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. And like, who had a better year last year? Zellsis.
Yeah.
Very clearly Zellsis. Like,
yeah.
I don't even think anyone would debate that that's true. So I don't think that it's crazy that you would go with someone who's more familiar with the language, who's probably, involves themselves more in the comms and helps out with ideas and stuff like that. who, you know, people seem to like as a teammate in general. If the gap you feel like is somewhat who's more flexible than Pancata for sure as well, like if you feel like the gap in terms of their skill as a player is pretty close, then you probably would go with Zellsis.
Yeah, I mean, I like again, it's so hard to make any of these statements without like internal comms information, basically. But everybody knows that Zellsis is one of like the loudest and most active comms players in the game, period. And I'm sure that that feels pretty good for somebody like John QT, who is tasked with leading the most popular team in the world, stepping up from tier 2 into tier 1 into this crazy high pressure situation, to have somebody like Zellsis who's been playing competitive FPS. Because remember, this is a guy, he probably is, I think, far and away the most experienced person on this team, because he's been playing like Counter-Strike for years before Valorant at like a relatively high level. So he has Saucy came from League of Legends, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, it depends what you mean by experience.
Yeah, but I mean, it probably just feels good to have another like very confident voice on this team as an IGL, just like, because sometimes, you know, things are going to go wrong in the game and you're not sure what's going wrong, and to have somebody else that can like give you ideas or like kind of take over some mid-round stuff is going to feel really, really nice, I would imagine. So, and from what I can tell from having listened into a lot of the comms videos, because that's like the one piece of off-season content that I have watched is like the listen-in rounds from the tournaments, and also I'll watch the comms videos. And Pancata's just, he's like a pretty quiet player. Like, you can just hear it. He's like not super confident in his English, it seems like. And he just is kind of a quiet player. People are like, Brian, and he'll be like, yeah, what's up, man? You know, and like Zellsis is like telling people what to do. He's like, do this, do this, do this. And that's very, very important at high level Valorant.
Yeah, and this isn't to say that like Pancata is like a, you know, because some people are probably going to take this as, you know, we think that Pancata isn't good enough for this team or whatever. And that isn't really the case. Pancata is easily a tier 1 player, you know, a good tier 1 player. And it also is an interesting decision of like, if you take out Pancata, does that alienate Sassy? Would Sassy be happy with that? Like that, obviously you have to think about the whole team dynamic. Like that might be a bit of a weird one, I guess. But yeah, I don't. But then again, like I'm saying, you know, I'd probably go with Zellsis, but I'm not sure that it really matters that much.
Yeah,
if I'm being honest. Like I honestly feel like the same probably about like if they play with either player, I'm kind of like, yeah, they'll be okay. But
let me
that's
stir
just
the
where I'm
pot a
at with
little bit
Sentinels.
more. Let me stir the pot a little bit more.
Go on.
Okay. There is another player on this team that's playing the flex role, which is Zellsis' role. And you could still have the best smokes player play the smokes role. Why is TenZ still playing?
TenZ is still playing because Sentinels still want to be the most popular role.
Wow, you just came out and said it directly like that.
Well, no, I think that TenZ is a decent player, but like, what's like, you know, if you want to be the most popular org, you play TenZ. Because if you don't, then everyone's just going to be mad at Sentinels, and like just not like, again, when we say Sen fans, we really mean for a good portion of that TenZ fans. Like
how many tournaments would Sentinels have to win this year with Zellsis in over TenZ for the Sentinels fans to forgive Sentinels for benching?
Oh, people would. A lot of people would just say, "Well, with TenZ, they would have also won those tournaments, but just with TenZ." Like that's just the way it's gonna go. Like the only way that would be possible is that if, you know, Zellsis had the most insane season of all time and was so clearly like, you know, unless Zellsis like literally installed cheats and got away with it for the entire season and just like blatantly cheated. And, you know, and no one noticed somehow. He managed to brainwash the entirety of the world to be like, oh, he's not cheating either. That's the only way that could happen. But yeah, in my personal opinion, they're probably about the same. I feel like it feels like classic Sentinels where, like, I'm not sure they will do that well. Like, like earlier on when they were forming this roster, everyone was kind of like, yeah, this looks good. Like, oh, the Americas are so wide open. Like, oh, this is their time. And maybe it will be. But right now, I'm like thinking about this team and what I've seen thus far, and they've had some good performances. But I'm just thinking, like,
solid 5th place, 6th
Yeah,
place.
like they'll be fine. I just feel like, oh, they're gonna be like, you know, like a mid-table, like decent team. Like
Right.
that's just how I feel about this team right now. That they'll probably just finish somewhere between 4th and 8th, and just be like, you know, a team that you win some, you lose some, and that's how they'll be. But it's Sentinels, so it's kind of like everything will get
Unacceptable.
blown. Yeah, everything get blown out of proportion. Anyway, let's talk about the other team, who won't be a mid-table team. PaperRex. This has been a great, in my opinion. Like Monyet's PR has been phenomenal. However you say that word, because it feels like everyone's just like, yeah, Monyet, really good player, they'll be fine. And I think that too. I've always thought, like, even when he was on Onyx G, I remember watching some of their games, and being like, this Monyet guy can play. Like, this dude can play. And then obviously we saw it last year with GE as well. He was by far and away their best player. And so I think everyone's just accepted, like, oh, this guy will be good. What if he's not, though? Like, what if they do struggle? Or what if it's not even that he's not a bad player, but maybe, you know, like he just doesn't fit the system. Obviously, Jing is like a madman. Like, what if he just, you know, doesn't fit the kind of like, what if they just can't replace Jing, right? And it just ends up like not quite working the same. You know, like we saw earlier on in the year with, you know, when things weren't going that well with like Benkai and the team. Yeah. What if that happens? Do you think that's a possibility?
I'm gonna be honest, no. I just don't think.
Monyet's PR is going crazy.
It really is going crazy. But I just don't think that's going to happen because I have faith in the rest of the team. Like, I have faith in Alex to figure out a system that works for Monyet. I have faith in like the environment that this team has from like all of the behind the scenes stuff that we've seen from them. It just seems like a delight to be part of this team. Like everybody just seems so happy to be there and playing the game. And I just can't imagine a situation where they just set him up to fail. And like clearly he has the aim and mechanics to play the game at a high level. So I just don't see any possibility that he is an utter failure. You know, I'm sure there'll be some pressure and maybe he won't come out of the gate with like the best performance and people will be, you know, talking and stuff like that. But I just can't see any situation where this team can't make it work. And yeah, I mean, I just have like supreme confidence in PaperRex next year.
Yeah, and I do think it's somewhat warranted. And I actually think there's a chance as well that like that they have more flexibility with Monyet, right? That they could do some different stuff as well. You know, Jing was like, for all of Jing's amazing qualities, you know, he wasn't the most flexible player in the world, right? He basically was to an extent a raise one trick, right? He could play
raise
like
Phoenix,
a Sage,
basically.
Yeah, Phoenix here or there, Sage here or there, but like, you know, he was playing raids like unless he like couldn't essentially on some maps. So you know, with Monyet, they can maybe do some different stuff, right? Get some different comps coming out as well, you know, with like a more flexible player. So yeah, I think if Sentinels beat PaperRex, that would be crazy. But it could happen.
Especially if Zellsis is playing instead of TenZ.
Let's move on. Okay, FullSense versus DRX. We don't have to talk about FullSense too much, but they do have some names that people will probably know, like Sushi Boys, Foxy.
John Olsen
has been around the block for a while.
This is a pretty good team, honestly.
Yeah, so and people are pretty angry as well. That didn't FullSense, did they just play against Talon and beat them? Oh no, they did lose.
No,
but they did they played them before and they did win. So, you know, people are a bit angry at Talon that, you know, we've got this full Thai team here who's like probably on a somewhat equal footing to a team that, you know, it's meant to be a Thai org that's going in a different way. So yeah, there'll be some names that you know there, and then you've got DRX, and DRX have played in some off-season tournaments, but not with their actual 5. Here on VLR, it has it listed, you know, the actual 5 that, you know, people are familiar with. So hopefully, I guess that they will play with this 5 because it'd just be good to see how they actually look. Where are you on the DRX circle of like, get your hopes up, get disappointed, this team's awful, you know, they start winning again, get your hopes up. Where are you on that circle right now with DRX?
I think I'm just in perpetual sadness with this team. And like it's like I know that they're gonna be good this year because there's no way that they're not good with the players that they have and just the structure that they have. Like they're going to be a good team. It doesn't mean they're gonna be a world class tournament winning team, and maybe they never will be. I really don't know. I just feel sad for players like Foxy9 or Zest, whichever one is the one that's like in limbo perpetually on this team, because it's one of them. Somebody's on limbo. Is it RB? I don't know. Like they played, like you said, a couple of events earlier on this offseason with Flashback replacing RB and Foxy9 coming in for Zest, or the other way around, I guess. I think there's like nothing really to read into there from what I understand. I think they're both just like given a break, but I don't actually know. Do you know? Do you have any information on that?
I have no idea.
Okay.
To be honest, if I had to guess, I would think that they would stick the classic DRX. They'll be conservative. They'll stick with the Zest RB Stack Expose Mako.
Yeah, it's just so it's just so DRX. It's so conservative. It's just so. Let's just keep running it back until it works, or we all die, basically.
Yeah.
I don't know.
DRX to me, I don't know. The American football fan in me sees them like the Buffalo Bills, where they like anytime the Bills are in a close game, you just feel like they're gonna lose. They either destroy a team, or like they destroy teams that they're clearly better than. And then they play a close game against teams who are also good, and you just think they're gonna lose this. Just watch, even when it feels like, oh, there's no way they're gonna lose this now, right? They still find a way. That's like, oh no, they'll find a way. They'll find a way to lose.
This narrative is funny because they have like taken steps to become one of the most clutch teams like in these international events until it gets to like the lower finals, until it gets to like the match that they have to win to actually win the event.
I mean, I think that's the thing with DRX. Even if they don't even have to win an event, I don't think. They just have to make the final. I legitimately think if they made a final of an event, and as long as it wasn't like a complete blowout in the final, like if they won a map in a final, people would probably accept like, okay, they could have won that tournament, right? Like on a different day, they could have won that tournament.
Yeah,
and people would kind of like
fourth, third place is like
I think the thing is that it's just like they're always not even like. It's like they're not even within grasp. It's not like they're touching the trophy or within grasp of it.
Right.
They're just watching from further back.
Yeah.
But they're just always there. But they're always just looking at it, and they can never even like. there's like a barrier, a rope that they can't cross, like the VIP barrier that they can't cross, and I don't see how that changes personally, unless Termy goes off on like some sort of mission and goes
vision quest,
in the mountains meditating. Gets the ayahuasca out and goes meditating and comes out with like a different perspective on the game and goes like, guys, let's just run it down and just run our best execs on them over and over again, and comes up with some crazy stuff. Like, unless that happens, I just don't see how this team, how it's going to change. They're still going to finish in the top 2 of Pacific.
I mean, the crazy thing is they just have the same coaching staff too. It's like the same players and the same coaching staff. Like, do you think that if they just like let Glow be the head coach, would that have any effect? Do they have to change coach? Like, how does this team take the next step? Is it just them not being? It's like variance, and they can't get any better, and they just need to like keep playing, and it'll work eventually.
This is always the thing, right? There's often in sports or esports these teams that were like, oh, they just can't quite get over the hump, right?
So desperate for DRX to win a tournament.
Yeah, and you end up just like feeling so bad for them that you're just like, oh, if only they could do it. But then like often when it comes to these big games, you're looking at like a sample size of like 5.
Right.
Right? Like it's such a small like sample size of where you just say, oh, if they just won that game. Yeah, but your sample size is so small of like those crucial big moment games that someone's probably going to flip, like, with so many teams, someone's going to flip tails like 5 times in a row and lose. Yeah. Like, that's just how it is. And maybe some of it is, unfortunate, but I don't know. I feel like it's in their core because the thing is, we were saying all these same things last year, and they did make a change. They brought in Foxy9. They changed their team.
Right.
And it led to almost the exact same place.
Right.
they didn't get better.
Well, they didn't like commit to it, right? Because it was like,
well, yeah, that's true. That is
was
true.
like, and now we're in the tournament, and we're back to Zest because we don't want to take the chance that Foxy9 might not.
But even with Foxy when Foxy was playing at his best, their level of performance. You know, it wasn't like a massive like swing one way or the other. Like I think you could put Foxy in there now, and it would still be relatively the same. It's just who they are. Like that's just how good they are. And that's the way it will always be until the end of time. Let's move on to your favorite team. Oh, this is my favorite team versus your favorite team. Fancy United Esports versus Team Liquid.
Who's even on Team Liquid? I'd completely
Team Liquid is now Yampy, Nat, Enzo, Mystic, and Kaiko. The Apex trio have joined Yampy and Nats.
Which is very interesting.
Get your opinion on the roster first. Let's go.
So, okay. Obviously, this team has kind of seemingly struggled with an identity crisis, like basically since inception. It seems like even back during like the Scream days. Like, what is this team supposed to be doing? What is their identity? Who are they? What are their strats? You know. I think honestly, we can probably say that maybe the Scream Sliggy iteration was better than what they showed last year overall. I mean, as far as like an average performance, they certainly went to more tournaments and did better in them.
That's an interesting point. The Sliggy Scream days, there's a part of me that's like in the very early days, like 2021, there's a part of me that's just like, you know, no one knew what they were doing. Like, if you had good aimers, you're gonna do pretty well back in those days, right? You had like a pretty heavy, like, you know, some good CS experience. You know, early days, that's what's gonna carry you. But yeah, I mean, the team last year. My thing with Team Liquid, and I was thinking about this, of like all of the other best teams, like literally every single one I could think of, you can kind of tell what their philosophy is.
Yeah, exactly.
Team Liquid are like the best team that I have, and this was true like back in the Scream days, and this is true like for last year as well. I have no idea what their philosophy was.
Yeah.
Other than like the one consistent thing they've had throughout their teams is like changing people's roles.
trying stuff out to try and they seem like they're constantly trying to like bail water out of a sinking ship. Is like, what can we possibly do to try and fix the problems that we're having? And like it kind of works, but it's never good enough to actually like really challenge take the next step. So with that point in mind of this constantly changing philosophy, my one major worry with this team, obviously Enzo, Mystic, Keiko, they showed good skill, good, you know,
they're tier one, good tier one players. I mean,
tier one
Mystic
level.
Mystic and Enzo like have been fairly deep in international tournaments. Like, and in those tournaments, I mean, sometimes they didn't have great performances, but other times they looked very good. So
my question is though, you have 3 people from the old Team Liquid squad, including the coach. Actually, I guess maybe 4 if you include like the coach and the assistant coach or analyst. And then you have 3 players from Apex. So which philosophy is going to control how this team functions? Because your IGL and 2 of your players, including the Duelist and Mystic, I assume is playing Smokes. So I guess it's like the IGL and the Duelist kind of tend to dictate how things work in teams a lot of the time. And so you've got this Apex philosophy and this Apex playbook and these Apex ideas coming in. And then you have kind of an established coaching staff and then 2 fairly star players. So how is that going to mesh? And are we going to see a similar thing where it's like, God, what are we doing this week? You know?
Yes. If you're asking me like what Team Liquid should do, if I had to guess, and again, I don't know any of these people personally or whatever, but if you could just tell, like if I was wishing the best for Team Liquid, I would just say whatever Enzo wants to do it. Just let him dictate whatever his philosophy is. Everyone shape around that. Will that happen? because it's Team Liquid, I'm almost certain it won't. I'm almost certain because he's, as you said, like because he's the one coming into a new team,
right?
You know, where you've got like, I mean, Yampy and Nats are like big names. I mean, Nats is one of the biggest names in the game, right? So you've got like really established, like big time players already
With
there.
specific play styles too. I think Yampy and Nats
Yeah.
have two of the more unique play styles as players.
Exactly. Yeah. So I could very much see like it not going like that. And then if you're like, this is the problem, right? You would think like, oh, hand over your philosophy to the IGL. But then, like you said, you've got a player like Nats, who it's like, well, he's kind of our star player. So do I tailor things around him? Like, it's such a just a mismatch. And then as I said, because like Yampy has been on these teams, like Yampy has played almost like every agent in the game at this point, you know, and you know, just trying out so many different things. It's like you don't even know, like Yampy's so good at opping, but you know, maybe his best agent is, I don't even know. Yeah, what is Yampy's best agent? Because obviously you brought in Kaiko to probably be like your jet player.
Right.
You know, so what are we, like it's just there's so many questions that I have with this team, and I honestly wouldn't be shocked like if like Team Liquid, I feel like they are going to do the normal Team Liquid thing of they will be good. They might, you know, make it to an international or two. If they do, they probably won't look great at it. Like because as soon as they come up against like the real good teams, I feel like they'll fold. But they might be better than, you know, like a decent amount of teams just because they, you know, are better.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty astute as far as analysis of this team goes. I mean, I'm totally willing. I want to be clear. I'm not like I don't hate this team. I don't hate the players, but it's just like
They're just annoying. Like, I think people get it.
Yeah, it's just like I'm just always so like I don't know what's happening, you know, with this team. I feel like I can get a read on like a lot of other teams, and like you said, the philosophy thing is like I just don't understand what the plan is for this team a lot of the time. It's like it makes me frustrated. Speaking of teams that we don't know what the plan is, Fancy, are they gonna like imagine Fancy comes out and crushes Team Liquid with some like Phoenix Gecko comp?
I mean, that would make a great video for me, so I kind of hope it happens, but I'm not holding my breath. Like Fancy, that I love them because they're interesting and they clearly, like, this is the thing. Fancy United, I have more of a philosophy than Team Liquid. Like you can tell, like they you know want to think about the game differently.
Innovate.
They want to innovate. They want to try their own stuff. Like, you know, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, they'll be a fun team to watch at the very least, just for their comps. Speaking of teams who we have no idea what they're doing, though, let's talk about T1, because T1 got a roster.
Left field.
Yeah, T1 got a roster together, and it was like, oh yeah, this looks decent. Yeah, this looks like it could work. And then they signed Rossi as well. And so now they've got like a 7-player-ish roster. And do we know who's like actually like guaranteed to play? Like ZETA, I assume, is IGLing, so will play.
Yeah.
Saya player, I assume, will play. King, you know what I think about King. I think he's insane, so he should play. But if King doesn't play, I am going to never watch. Like, if King even doesn't play one map once, I will refuse to watch T1 for any game they play. Even if they get to the Champs Grand Final, I will not watch it.
Careful, TMV. This is now 2 Korean teams that you have vendettas against. You're one away from just writing off the entire country.
Yeah, but this is in defense of a Korean player, so
that's true. I agree. I mean, this Rossi signing was just so bizarre to me because, like, first of all, why? Like, I just don't understand. Like, you have ZETA, who is a very good support Sova player, pretty good IGL seemingly. Like, it seemed to go relatively well, even though it's not necessarily something that maybe he wants to do. I have no idea, but obviously good support player. Saya player is not getting replaced. He's simply the best individual Korean player, in my opinion, mechanically. I think he is. Carpe was the weak link last year. Just straight up. Like he was very clearly worse than everybody else on this team. He had some decent games, but his agent pool was not very good, and he really, really folded in some of their bigger games. So I think that he was probably the weak link on this team. So then when they signed Izu, I know nothing about him as a player, but everybody was talking him up as being a good player. So I assume like, oh, he just comes in and replaces Carpe, I guess. And I'm on board with you about King. I think that he's a tier 1 Sentinel. He was so good last year and has always been consistently very, very solid. And then the whole like Exacurate thing. My question about this is like, how good is he? Like, we really don't know. People just assume that he's really good because he's Forsaken's brother, right? but he's played like very few officials, and his stats are like very mediocre on all of the agents that he's played in all of the officials. So it's
maybe
like
he'll be. So there's a story in football, my football, soccer to you Americans. There's a great story of a guy who called up Southampton, I think it was, who were a professional team in the Premier League at the time. He called them up and said, "Hey, I'm George Weah's cousin." Who George Weah was like a like Ballon d'Or winner, best player in the world for a year. He said, "Hey, I'm his cousin. You should give me a tryout." And they were gonna give him a tryout, but it got like called off for whatever reason. So they just decided like, oh, he's George Weah's cousin. He must be okay.
Signed him.
They signed him because they were that desperate for players at the time, and he managed to actually get on to the pitch of like an official game, and he was just some random guy who was lying. So I'm not gonna say
he wasn't even the brother or cousin.
Oh no. He was just some random guy who some random dude who managed to play like professionally for Southampton. So yeah, I'm not gonna say that Exacurate.
You're not saying he's a fraud.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, he is Forsaken's brother. So that much is true. But you are right. Like, I have no idea how good he is at Valorant.
Yeah.
So yeah, who knows how? I mean, and I assume with this Rossi signing, can he speak Korean? I mean, I guess Exacurate as well. I mean, they're gonna speak English, right?
They were already commenting English last year.
Yeah.
So,
but they're full English. There's not even a doubt this time.
Yeah, and I guess one interesting thing, I think PLATCHAT raised this in their last episode where they were talking about this team also, was that they seem to be leaning into just going full international with this signing. Like this, like down the line, like their idea is to be like a bunch of, but then it's weird, like, because if you're going for full international and you're using an import slot on, I mean, there's no nice way to say this, but Rossi's just been in like the middling tier 2, tier 3 teams for his entire career, basically. Like, I think he played on Immortals when Immortals was decent, but like,
what, you don't think Lemonade Stand were good?
I mean, I think that Rossi is a good player. I've seen him do very well in a lot of these tier 2 and tier 3 tournaments, but he's just never made it into tier 1, and maybe that's just because the talent pool is too deep. But it's like, of all the players that you could have signed, why him specifically, and why an American player when there's so much good talent in Pacific? I really don't get what's going on with this team.
Yeah, it is very much a move out of left field, and I will, like, honestly, I don't know if we know who's actually going to be playing for this team, because I think, didn't Isu play in like one of these off-season tournaments or something, and like looked decent? So I honestly have no idea what they're going to do.
And that's another layer too, is that, was it the manager or the coach, like when these players were signed, like they tweeted like, this player is 100% starting for us this year. I think it was about Exacurate and also Izu. Okay. I'm pretty sure it's those two. It's like, what is happening?
Yeah, well, yeah, I have no idea what they're doing. And they're playing against EDG, which is like a good, for whatever team they throw out there, that's like a good challenge, because I know like what I think of EDG because they've been playing so much. Like, we've seen them play, so you kind of have a decent idea of like where they are as a team. So it'll be a good like test for T1. Like, okay, this random team that you've put together, like whoever's playing, are they actually any good?
I
And
think they're
guess,
going to get obliterated by EDG.
I would say it depends on who they play in terms of what iteration they play.
Mhm.
It's going to be my opinion, but I guess we'll see. And then yeah, EDG are kind of the last kind of like team we've been in there. Obviously, we're talking about China before. They've dominated China, although looked a bit shaky. They did have to go through the lowers in the final.
Yep.
The final like tournament they were in. So who knows? I guess with EDG, like they're fine. They're good. As I said, they're like a good measuring stick. I think. Based on this, who do you think will win this tournament? If you had to pick right now, who would you pick?
I think it's going to be either DRX or PaperRex.
Wrong. Fancy United are going to win it. You heard it here first.
Okay.
Let's move on. I will move on to another tournament with some teams.
Wow, a tournament with teams. Incredible.
Yeah, 3 Pacific teams and 1 EMEA team, another EMEA team with some intrigue. Maybe a little bit of intrigue. That's the Riot Games 1 Invitational, which has Bleed, NaVi, DFM, and ZETA Division all competing in it. So definitely kind of a tournament that, I mean, this is the first time we've seen NaVi, I think, back with Artis playing. Bleed are definitely a team with some intrigue with Yay. This will be, I think, the first time we've seen Bleed with Yay, so definitely some intrigue
they haven't
there.
played a single official yet, have they?
So this is like the first time we'll see that team actually play. DFM on VLR currently have 2 players, so unless they're going to turn up with 2 players, that will be interesting to at least see what their team is.
Starts in 5 days.
And ZETA Division have some, have made their roster changes as well, so we'll get another chance to see, what they look like after Red Bull as well. So definitely a tournament with some intrigue in it.
Yeah.
There are rumors, saw this on the Valorant Comp subreddit, the DFM and Crazy Raccoon might do a kind of moist Shopify merger of rosters, kind of like those 2 teams in NA did. And so we might just end up with kind of a combo team. That's what DFM's team will actually be, with kind of Crazy Raccoon, which doesn't make I don't understand how that would work from kind of like we're a team that's in partnership and you aren't. Like, I don't know. Like, it makes sense for like 2 like teams who are, both competing against each other for Ascension. Like, hey, we're 2 good Ascension teams, so we combine our rosters, then we'll win Ascension, right? Like, that makes sense. I don't really understand how that works for like a team who's not in tier 1 and a team that is. Seems kind of a bit weird, but the whole DFM thing, obviously they have never won a game in tier 1. Like, you're never gonna probably kick someone out for solely performance-based reasons if you're Riot. But like, if they are just like really like doing the bare minimum, like, oh, we can't be bothered to sign a team. We'll just merge with your team. Like, we can't be bothered to scout players.
That's the thing though. It's like and then I have to wonder who becomes the primary owner, because I thought that Crazy Raccoon was a team that had like, at least seemingly on social media, they're like massive, right? They've got a couple of the biggest streamers in Japan. And I'm just wondering like how, I mean, DFM has like 16 sponsors or something like that. Crazy Raccoon also used to have, I don't know if they still do, but I thought they used to have like 20 sponsors on their jersey or something like that. So like, how is that gonna work? Who's gonna have like how do you combine the names? That's my main question to you.
Detonation Raccoons, Crazy Focus Me. I like Crazy Focus Me, because Focus Me anyway is just kind of like, I don't know, it's like, those things like the like Chinese tattoos people get on them and they're wrong, and then you translate it back and it's just like a random word. So that feels like what Detonation's name is.
Yeah, okay. Crazy Focus Me.
Yeah.
Focus me crazy.
Maybe, yeah. Anyway, so we don't know what DFM are gonna do. Basically, you can't preview DFM because
Yeah.
they don't know what they're gonna do. It seems like it. But Navi with Artis, tell me right now, where will Navi finish in the EMEA League?
Top 2.
Top 2. Okay, so you're pretty,
I'm high on this team.
pretty high on Navi. Feel like they'll just be very good.
Yeah.
Okay. And will the team? I'm assuming you think that the team will be better than the CNET version then.
Yes, I can't imagine that they won't be, just because I'm just like such a like firm believer on vibes on a team, and I just feel like the artist vibes versus the CNET vibes has to just be worlds apart as far as like the interaction with the players and like you know, just in the game and keeping artists and keeping Angel in check, and you know, like I feel like Angel needs his artists to be there. Like they're together, they form Voltron, but apart they're just like weak, you know, versions of themselves.
Yeah, like you were saying earlier about PaperRex, like you know, like Fnatic, it's like, you know, the meme with the guy who's like really try-harding and like, you know, like sweating and stuff like that, going crazy, and then like PaperRex is the guy who's just like singing,
Yeah, stable,
just like chilling.
the stable Ronaldo singing the song in the
Like
background.
Navi, I think they would be like with Artis and Angel. Navi would feel like a pretty like hot, like they're not like PaperRex in terms of like, you know, just chilling and like having fun, but you could definitely see that like they would be fun. Like if things are going well, like Navi would be a very fun team to be on in general with Angel and Artis. A lot of, you know,
come on,
banter.
Come on, bro.
A lot of
get the ace, bro.
So yeah, I think the Navi 2 will be pretty decent, but give me your thoughts on Bleed as well, because Bleed, I feel like there's a big range of outcomes for this team. Like, you know, it could just completely go wrong. You know, they are a new team into the league, whatever, right? So it could, who knows? But I think some people are being like, oh no, this is like the clear third best team in Pacific. So where do you stand on Bleed?
Yeah, so I mean, in the past when we've talked about them, I've been on record as saying that I'm a pretty big believer in this team, just because I can't imagine that EA is washed, regardless of what the VLR forums and Reddit forums would tell you. I think that they have a good and now very proven coach and coaching staff. You know, obviously I'm a little bit biased because I talk to their analyst quite a bit and like think that he does good work, and but I also think that he's done a good job scouting, because like he literally pulled Crazy Guy out of nowhere to be one of the best IGLs in Ascension globally. They've got good talent on this team. I think I'm a little bit worried about this first game going up against Navi, because like this could be Navi's like coming out party, like, hey, we're back, you know, we're gonna be one of the best teams of the year, and Bleed has like this pressure of their very first official together. Got to showcase, yay, you know, like, and you just run into like this, you know, immovable object of Navi who's going to be doing some weird stuff. Like you can't anti-strat them anyway, and who knows what they're going to be playing, you know?
Yeah.
It could be a slaughter, and then the confidence levels in Bleed will drop. But I think over the course of the year, I think they're going to be quite good.
Okay, yeah, I could definitely see that. And in your conversation, did I misremember this, or did they say that Ye was going to be playing full-time Duelist with Almas?
That was what was implied. I don't necessarily know if that will be the case, you know, because obviously Darion was their Duelist. Yeah, but that was what was implied by Almas. Yeah.
Okay, that'll be interesting. And then finally, we have ZETA Division, who are, I mean, at Red Bull home ground. I kind of feel like ZETA, people just like them, right? People want to like ZETA. People are just like, oh, ZETA Division, you know, like they had one of the most memorable tournament runs of all of Valorant history, and ever since, you know, people have just like liked this team.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like they're kind of what I would consider the Pacific Sentinels, where people care about this team, but they're just kind of mid. Like that, but when I say mid for all you kids out there, I mean what the word like actually means, like middling, like like a middle of the pack team. I don't mean that they're
mid
bad.
as derogatory, which is how it's used these days.
Yes, I mean mid as they are like legitimately like in the middle, like they're okay. That's what ZETA Division are, and I still feel like even with the roster changes, they're getting dumpstered by Fnatic. They kind of they did. They beat Cloud9 and then lost to Cloud9 the second time. But it's just kind of like,
right.
That's who they are.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's like, okay, granted, at the Red Bull Homeground, they didn't play with Depp.
True.
So that is something important to remember, because he truly is the catalyst for this team. I think that as much love as Laz gets, and obviously he is a good player. He is a very good player. I mean, everybody loves Laz. I think he put out a birthday tweet today or something like that, and it got like 40,000 likes in the first few hours. Everybody loves Laz. But Depp is a true superstar as far as like his ability to play the game, and he is the reason that they will be able to beat teams.
Yeah, and the thing about Depp is as well, he just like, I don't know if you've ever been on a night out and just like saw someone who you just thought like, oh, they look cool, like kind of like in a, not like a cool like, oh, necessarily you would be friends with them, not that you wouldn't be friends with them, but he just looks kind of cool. He just gives off like kind of like main character vibes, where he'd be dressed in something a bit more out there than everyone else, and it's just like, oh, you just look cool.
Yeah, it's usually me, so I don't look at people.
Yeah. You're that guy. You're that guy. I don't know. That's just my thoughts on Depp.
No, it's true. He's got like the interesting hair. He's got like the tattoo sleeve on his arm. Like he plays.
Like, you go out somewhere and you just see someone, and it's just like, oh, they're wearing kind of fancy clothes.
Yeah.
And they kind of just look, cool. They just look cool.
That's your
not that Depp
is cool. Okay.
Yeah, not that there's anything really great about that. I'm sure, there probably is a 16-year-old listening to this that's worried about whether or not they are cool. Like, trust me, no one gives a shit. But, yeah, Depp just looks like, he would be cool. Anyway, let's move on from this Riot Games 1 Pro Invitational 2023. And let's move on to something closer to your own heart. Well, now you have a direct competitor with MCE, because MCE is going. What university is it?
Maryville. So MCE.
Maryville?
Yeah,
it's not Maryland.
No. So this is the interesting thing.
What the hell is Maryville?
Let me explain. For people who don't really understand the collegiate Valorant scene,
me
basically. In North America, collegiate sports, meaning football, basketball, etc., is massive. The industry is like almost bigger than pro sports as far as like the fandom and the amount of money it generates.
Yes.
Most of these universities do not give a shit about esports. And so all of these smaller, oftentimes mostly online universities have decided to invest in esports.
That does make sense. That's good branding,
their way to kind of like, elevate their stock in the collegiate world. And so that's why you have like places such as Northwood University, which won the first Red Bull Campus Clutch Championship. Tiny little university, mostly online in Michigan. Maryville University is, I'm not even honestly sure where Maryville is. I think
I thought it was Maryland.
No,
University.
Maryville, it's a college in St. Louis, Missouri. So
that's a bad job by them, because Maryville, Maryland, like, come on. I mean, those American names, you gotta get more creative. I mean, half of your names are just stolen from Britain anyway. So you could at least
all right. Let me continue talking about collegiate esports.
Who do you work for, by the way?
I don't work for anybody. I work
Well,
for
okay.
myself and Acend.
What team are you working for?
I am currently volunteering to help coach the University of Oregon team, which is a very large school.
That tiny little
that has a huge amount of money going towards its regular sports teams, because that's where the founder of Nike went to school. So Oregon has lots and lots of money in its regular sports programs, and its esports program
yes,
is just
this
like
university which has a 54,000 capacity stadium. The small little
we have an esports lounge with 23 working PCs.
That is crazy though, isn't it? Really, how do they get the money to build these stadiums? We were going off track, but I've always been interested in this. Is this just the tuition fees pay for the stadium?
I think probably a lot of it is like donors. I mean, they just go to Phil Knight and they're like, "Hey man, can you give us $35 million from your Nike money to build a stadium, and we'll put your logo on it."
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know,
but don't you think it's crazy, like, to have that big of a stadium?
I mean, it is crazy, dude. Like, I've been to a game there, and it feels like an NFL stadium. Like, it's crazy how much money these colleges have. But
MCE has gone to Maryville.
Yes, back on track. Oh god, we're at that point in the episode, an hour and 25 minutes in, where we're just rambling about stuff. So buckle up, folks, because it's gonna be a little bit longer. My thoughts on this, to get us back on track, is that this is very good for collegiate esports overall, because it helps to give legitimacy to collegiate esports, especially if MCE is able to do what he has stated, which is that he wants to take the Maryville collegiate team through challengers and into the Challengers League.
That would be is that even allowed?
I'm pretty sure that's what he said. I mean, I wouldn't see why not, as long as you go through Premier. Like, you can qualify through Premier.
Yeah. But would they allow to get into Tier 1? Like, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, that's like 2 years down the line, because first they would have to qualify for Ascension, and then they would have to win Ascension.
Yeah.
But, I don't really know, honestly, how it's going to work, just because teams like Northwood, for example, will play in sort of some of these like extracurricular, let's call them small tournaments, but they'll play not under the Northwood name. And I think it's probably just because the school only like wants them playing in like CVAL, like the actual collegiate league, under the name of the school. So, there's some chance that maybe it's like the Maryville team, then it has to be called, Newt version 2 or something like that as they go through the Ascension qualifiers. But because Maryville is investing, seemingly, I would imagine that hiring MCE is probably not like Tier 1 levels of salary, but they're probably spending a decent amount of money to bring in somebody that has coached in Tier 1 for a while. Maybe they seem to be fairly all in. Like, there's a few of these smaller schools, like the Northwood, like the Maryville. There's a few other ones that have like consistently seemingly invested in esports a lot, and they have like top teams in like a ton of different esports, and they seem to spend money on esports as sort of like their sports. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I think it's good. I think collegiate esports needs a lot of help from the small amount of experience that I do have working in it. Just like the organization is kind of all over the place. The leagues are very kind of inconsistent. It's hard to like schedule stuff. The level of practice is much worse than even like Tier 1 and Tier 2 and Tier 3 scrims. The kids are having to contend with classes as well. So like schedules are all over the place. But I will say that if you go to school, you will come out with something. You will come out with a degree in something, which, I went to school to play baseball. That was my thing. I went to school to play baseball and wasn't really thinking about anything else beyond that, because I was 18 or 19 years old, and I was like, whatever, who cares about future?
What was your role in baseball?
I was a pitcher.
A pitcher?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And then over the course of that, it became clear that I was not going to become a professional baseball player, and I just got a degree in what was called interactive media studies, and I was like, whatever, I'll just get a degree in this because taking classes in Photoshop and like video editing and journalism is fun for me, and I have to take classes while I'm here, so I'll just do this. And now I literally use my degree all the time, not having planned to do that, but now I use my degree all the time and the skills that I learned through school. So I think it's a better, healthier way to pursue a career if you can in esports. You have sort of like the safety net, like you're living on campus, maybe you're living with your parents, it doesn't really matter. You're not like incurring expenses of like trying to go chase this dream while not getting paid anything. Because that's the thing about tier 3 esports, is that like nobody's getting paid. You have to pay to enter these tournaments, which might, and it's usually like 50 or $100, but that's going to build up over time, because you're like paying $100 to go play in Nights Monthly, but you have no income. So it's like your net minus 100 every week or something like that. And it's just a miserable environment. Like you're stressed about money, you're stressed about your future. Like everything sucks in tier 3 because you're grinding for like this tiny minuscule thing. And like, if you can just have sort of like the mentorship of a college coach, like especially somebody like in MCE, especially if more colleges invest in coaching and stuff like that, because mentorship is something that esports sorely lacks. So having like a path to pro, well, you can kind of like also set yourself up for the future, get mentored, learn skills that are important, not just for being on a team, but also for the future of your life. God, here I am trying to just like sell college esports, and I never thought I would do that, because I honestly came out of college and was like, I kind of wish I hadn't gone to college. But looking back on it, I'm glad that I had that experience. So,
well, there you go. That really only applies to Americans though, because that doesn't really exist here in Europe. Anyway, Eccles is on this team, and JC Stani. Some names people might know. But yeah, there you go. Stay in school, I guess was the message.
I kind of blacked out for the last like 10 minutes. I don't know what I've been talking about.
Anyway, let's move on from school, something that a lot of people don't enjoy, and talk about everyone's favorite topic, the Valorant meta.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you can get this graphic up.
Let's see. I'm gonna pull it up over your face.
Yeah, that you've handedly put up there. But this is whenever the graphic gets there, this is from the most recent, I think, China tournament. And it's basically just a summary of all the picks and bans.
Shout out to Phobia, I think, is the guy who made this and put it on Twitter or Reddit. Just, we're not stealing anything. We just want to show you a cool graphic.
So this is just all of the maps picked and not picked. So you can see Lotus and Haven not banned at all. That's almost interesting in its own right. But Lotus,
no, they were banned.
Okay. Wait, what
banned.
am I?
Red bar is
second banned. Yes, sorry. Yeah. But not first banned, which is interesting.
Not first banned ever, yeah.
And Lotus, you can see, I mean, just in there a ton. I mean, a ton of Lotus, which is kind of interesting. I mean, obviously at this point, Lotus has been out for a while, and I think, to me, when I'm kind of looking at this, obviously, like, and it's kind of maybe Acend is the exception in this graph, but to me, I've always thought like the maps that get picked most, the maps that teams like the most, are kind of the most stable, like the most predictable in terms of like how it works out. And I think that Lotus is a pretty stable map, even though some of the other maps are much older than it. Basically, almost everyone at this point is playing the map in the same sort of way. But I'm interested in your thoughts. What do you take away from this whole graph?
Yeah, so I think what you touched on there, it really is the main point, is that a team like Fnatic showed the world the roadmap of how to play this map. Because now everybody is just playing the Fnatic comp. Like literally everyone is playing the double smokes, Sky, Raze,
Yeah, there's like only one difference, which is like
sometimes Astra, sometimes Omen.
Sometimes Astra, sometimes Fade instead of Sky, but it's pretty much doing the same thing.
Yeah, but beyond that, it's the way in which the map is being played, which is like you throw your utility A, the other team goes to get the C orb, you make sure that you have your Viper and Killjoy to stop the C like explode, then they come back and re-clear A, and then you just kind of like play around the A space. It's like basically as formulaic Valorant as it gets. Like every round is essentially the same for the entire map. And I think that it's sort of taken Ascent's spot in that there's a roadmap that everybody understands, and then it's just whoever executes better on this map wins the game. And I think that teams really like that because it basically removes all of like the kind of like the scary variables of like, oh, we're not so good at this map, or like the comps can change on this map. We don't really particularly like the play style of this map. Everybody understands how Lotus works because everybody's just kind of agreed on that. Fnatic figured it out. It was the best, clearly. They, won 13 straight games on Lotus, so everybody just copied exactly what they were doing. There's been almost no innovation whatsoever since then. And it basically just comes down to like it's like one of those like gentlemen's duels. We all agree that everybody knows what's going to happen in this, and we'll just like walk 3 paces, turn, and shoot at each other, and whoever wins wins. Yeah. So
speaking of the lack of iteration, updating of that map, I it still baffles me. And I've mentioned this in videos before, but like it baffles me. Teams who pick Omen still do the one way outside A, even when the Viper wall that all the attacking teams use goes up and makes your one way useless. And like every team who plays Omen still does that one way. Yeah. And yet every single game, there will be a moment where the Omen is like up on top of rubble, looking at that one way, the Viper wall will go up, and you can like see like them just like back up and like panic and be like, wait a minute, that's not a one way anymore. They could just walk out. Oh my God. And this happens every single Lotus game, but it's like, no one has realized, like no one thinks about this map whatsoever. It's all just so like cookie cutter formulaic that no one has bothered to realize, like, guys, you're wasting a smoke. This Viper wall can come up at any time. Like any time it could come up. And as soon as it does, your one way doesn't exist. And why would they ever walk through the one way when they can just put up the Viper wall for a second, drop it, and now they're out and on you. And go and watch like any game of Lotus with an Omen, and you will see that one way be thrown. And if they're playing against Viper, it makes no sense, and it just baffles me every single time. It's like, what?
I mean, that just speaks to it. Literally, just speaks to the. You know what? I'm just going to go ahead and say it. It just speaks to the laziness of most people when it comes to strategy in this game. It's just like, laziness. What does this team do? And they win. We copy everything directly. And it's like, there's no thought to the understanding of why this one way was thrown at the point that it was thrown. There's no thought to why this Viper wall goes here at the point that it's just Fnatic put this Viper wall. We're going to do this Viper wall.
Yeah.
Like, the Viper wall that is used for defense that goes like across the front of B and then goes across tree, that Viper wall is trash. It's like really bad unless you're using it specifically how certain teams use it, which is like to advance how far you can play an A and then fall back behind the wall as you want to get pushed off and then have cover. But most teams just like have that wall and they're like, oh, it's to contest B and A, like when they go through a tree, which is awful because it's like half a second of decay that does absolutely nothing most of the time. And like most people don't even use it how Fnatic uses it. And so it's like, it's something I did an interview with Fraud and we talked about the Harbor Viper comp, and he was talking about how like when you are the person that creates the meta, you just have such a huge advantage because people will copy you, but they just don't understand any of the theory behind what you're doing. Like they might get little pieces of it, but you just always are like 5 steps ahead of everybody that's copying you because you know why you made the decisions to create the comp and use the utility that you did. And everybody else is just like, well, we've got 7 maps to work on, so let's just like take this from this team. You know?
And like, and people might be thinking that I'm talking about like, oh yeah, you're talking about like, the lower level tier 1 teams and tier 2 and stuff like that.
Everybody does it.
Like, go and watch EG versus Loud on Lotus, and there's a round where EG, I think, are on like a half buy or like an eco, and who would it be? It would be 2 playing Omen, and he puts up that one way. EG walk up with their wall on Lotus, and like get right by him. Like get past the one way and then just throw out like a nade and a nano swarm and just kill him, and like and it's just like, and they give him a gun, right? And then EG get a gun and then they end up winning the round. Like like this is everyone, like the top teams do this still, and it's just like you would think like after just one instance of like being in that situation that like you would think like, oh well, yeah, that just doesn't work. The people would be able to like figure that stuff out. But yeah, I think we've been on this a lot, that a lot of teams, not all teams are guilty of this, right? Often it is the top teams who are less guilty of this than others.
Right.
That they just don't like think about the game and like, what they're actually doing and if it's actually having an effect, right? There's just clear instances where teams, like Leviathan are the one that come to my mind, right? That like with all of their saving that they were doing last year, and it was like clearly costing them a lot of their games. Like it clearly was having an impact on their games, but they just kept doing it over and over and over again.
We have one philosophy and we will never change.
That they'd made that decision at the start of the season, and it was like, well, that's it, right? Like that's just how we play, and that's just all we can do. And there's never any thought of like, well, this just isn't working. Maybe let's change it. But there's other things, and you were tweeting about this earlier. I don't know if you want to get into this, because I mean the map stuff, like I don't know how much else there is to glean in this from other than Chinese teams like Lotus.
I think one thing that is interesting is that both of the 3-site maps were the most picked.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know if there's like a ton to read into that, but I just think it's kind of an interesting point that like both of the 3-site maps were the most picked, and then I would say 2 of the most sort of like contentious weird maps were the most banned in the second phase, which were Split and Bind. And then sorry, that's in the second phase, but then I guess like first phase bans, it makes sense. Like Breeze, new map, or like new-ish map in terms of how it works, banned the most. Sunset, the newest map, banned the second most. And then I think everybody's just really tired of playing Acend, and so they're just banning Acend.
Yeah.
Do you think it's just because people want to play attack? Like they just want to have a better attack side?
I feel like a part of it is with a 3-site map, it just feels more like okay on attack. Like you just feel like you have a good chance no matter what, right? Like you just have more options. But I even think from a defensive point of view as well, it's like you say, Lotus is just very formulaic, but even Haven from like a defensive point of view definitely has challenges, especially with more and more Viper being played on the map. I think that's kind of changed stuff, and people are still figuring out how to actually defend against that. But there's still like, you still understand like, okay, yeah, if they plant B, it's not the end of the world, right? There's still kind of like a sense of what I think with Haven, people just have a very good sense of like what generally is good on the map and what generally is not, because it's just existed for so long. And just been played so long that even with a different meta kind of coming to the map with Viper, I still feel like the same fundamental principles of the map are true, but maybe people are just having to shift how you play it, which probably speaks to it as well. Like that had a pretty high second ban. It's probably like the ones who feel confident with like the newer direction of Haven, are like really happy with it. But there's still probably quite a few teams who maybe feel like, oh, we're not quite ready on Haven. We won't ban it because like we have some, like it's Haven. We know what we're doing to an extent, but we're maybe not super confident with everything. But speaking of Viper, you were tweeting about Viper earlier on, and this whole off season, people who are like come to my streams regularly and stuff like that, or watch my videos regularly, like will not like I've made so many videos about Viper this off season. I've been truly, and I was always high on Viper, but I feel like, I had that moment that Termi needs to have, the ayahuasca awakening, with like, I always thought that Viper was strong, but like as I just I've had the time to kind of digest and just think about the game more in general, the more I've just come to realize like this, like Viper, in my opinion, is not just the strongest agent in the game, but like when played correctly is strongest by a distance, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, for people who maybe don't totally get it, I think the summary is just that, like, what Viper allows you to do is just fundamentally change the map, like the layout of the map, right?
Yeah.
Every single round, you get to place a wall that just completely changes the sightlines in your favor, and then you get to manipulate that so you can change the map back and forth multiple times per round, which is just so strong.
I think the best example is like Bind, right? The way Bind is designed is like you got 4 choke points. But with Viper and the Viper setup, there just isn't a choke point. Like you just change, well, there is, I guess, but you change the choke point from that tiny little thing with next to the box, and like on top of the box, and it goes from that big to the whole range, and then also you could be in lamps. Like it just, like you've just taken away a choke point from the map, and you can do over and over and over and over again, and that just fundamentally was not how the map was designed.
Right. And that's another like interesting thing to think about too, as far as like the direction of the game moving forward, because if you have an agent that is just so like just at her core fundamentally better than every other agent in the game, and like again, people are going to disagree on that because the jet op, like whatever, but the power that Viper has to exert on a round is just there's no other agent that comes even close. There really isn't. And so, unless there's like some fundamental changes to this agent, I would imagine that she just continues to climb in pick rate, because I think people are finally catching on to it, even though she's been getting nerfed for like literally a year and a half, 2 years. Like, she is
it's crazy
so much worse than she used to be.
It's crazy to think how strong the old Viper was, and like no one really fully comprehended just how absolutely giga broken it was.
Dude,
like it's crazy.
Imagine the setups that are being used now on like Haven and Ascent with like the instant 50 decay wall, the crazy mollies, the Viper.
You could use both the orb and the wall at the same time, like, and it wouldn't affect how quick the fuel goes down. Like if you think about some of that stuff, like, oh my god, it would have been. I mean, it was, and just people just didn't maybe quite realize it. But yeah, like and for me, and you're saying like more and more people are starting to realize it, and that's true. But I'm watching some of these teams, and the way that I think about Viper and what I think is good with Viper, to me, there's a very easy tell that there's still a lot of teams that I don't think are really catching on. And that tell to me is like, if you're playing solo Viper on Breeze, I don't think you get it. Like, I don't think you understand about what's super strong about this. Like, obviously, defense side, Viper, I mean, that's just the other thing, right? The Viper is just incredibly good on the defense side as well.
She's the best sentinel in the game outside of Killjoy.
Like that's obviously close. Like the other part of it, that like Viper's insanely good on the defense side, which is just like funny, because obviously like when you think of like agents that have been good in the game, like everyone might first go to like, oh, Chamber, right? But Chamber on attack side was not good, right? Like he didn't give you almost anything. Like he gave you like some eco advantages, I guess, in a game where, in my opinion, economy doesn't matter as much anyway. But that it maybe is, but that's just my thoughts. But like Chamber gave you almost, not that much on attack. You'd be better off almost picking anything else on attack than even when Chamber was at its strongest. Right. But Viper, it's like one of the best defensive agents. Oh, and also, can just create so much pressure. And what I mean by teams who play solo Viper don't get Viper is because Viper, like she's not a controller. It's the only way I can say it. Yes, she has smokes, and that's like how it works, but it's just the way that you can, like, if you just put down the same setup every single round, and you can just threaten a team with all the time, as long as they're not ahead of your Viper setup, which you can use other agents to help check commonly in rounds all the time. Like, as long as they're not ahead of it, they don't know that it's like 5 people are there or no one's there all of the time. And you can just keep doing that over and over again, and just constantly say to your opponent, we might be about to exec on your site, but you can't rotate because the Viper wall is up on the other side, and you don't know whether, this is just one person on this side, and there's actually 4 people on the Viper side. So you've got to stay on both sides of the map, and you can't rotate, right? Like, everything about that is just so broken, right? Or if it's just someone like, hey, this person has just looked up really, really deep, like way deeper than they normally would be able to with how this map was designed. And, I can just hear all the footsteps and all the rotations. And so we're going to end up going to the correct site. Like, it's just so strong. And I've been thinking, like, how would I nerf Viper? And the suggestion that I kind of came up with, I don't think is perfect, but I think it might help. And that's having the orb be kind of like a cove where you just throw it and it goes up once.
And that's it.
And that's, you can't put it back up. And then, you adjust the fuel for how that would work, without the orb, I guess.
Maybe just have it with no fuel or something like that. And then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I would kind of say, because it would make her less strong on defense side as well. Because obviously the orb on defense is kind of a bit better, just in general, for putting it in that choke point.
It's a smoke that you can move many times in a round if you want to.
Yeah.
It's like you can put it up and down whenever you want. So just even like the capability of her smokes themselves, the fact that you can choose when they go down is so strong. The fact that you can,
like, the fact they don't have a timer means that you can't like get aggressive with it, because if you get caught at the wrong time getting aggressive with it, like trying to sneak up on a Viper smoke, well, maybe it drops while you're sneaking up and you just die. Like, that's the problem. There's just so many parts of this agent that is so strong.
Also, when I talked to Fraud, he said something, and it's funny because like I've kind of always thought about this, but I hadn't really, like, it was one of those things that like I knew subconsciously, but when he just like said it so plainly to me, I was like, oh my god, this agent is so silly. He's like, okay, so when they were talking about the Harbor Viper and they put it on Fracture, and it was like him and 2Es and playing ranked, and he's like, we threw the Viper wall and it covers, I don't know, sometimes like maybe like 4 angles, so it kind of counts as 4 smokes, and then you put it up and down, and then you put it up and down, and then you put it up and down. That's 12 smokes. I was like, 12 smokes. Brimstone has 1, 2, 3 smokes. Like, wait a second. That's not fair at all.
Yeah. I mean, I remember watching that. When I watched that, I was like, I mean, and it just and the way that I would say it to everyone is, if you just watch a game and like you just average out like what the average value of utility is, like, even if you think like, oh yeah, the jet dash is a good ability, and it's good to pair with the up, but there are countless examples in a game where someone will, press the dash with an up in hand, and the timer will have run out and they won't use it, right? So essentially you didn't get any value from it, right? Or you'll do it but not actually get dash in time, or you won't have it activated in time for when you needed it. Like, there's plenty of times when that happens, and so your average like value from a certain ability might not be that high. When it comes to Viper, like your average value of your floor of like value for a Viper, like the worst case scenario, is still like really good.
And remember,
like,
this is her signature we're talking about, the wall. So you get it every round for 0 cost.
Yeah, and it just feels like the average value that you get for the wall, and then obviously like the orb is also really good.
Yeah,
having 2 mollies in this game is just. I mean, imagine
also
that as well,
the
with the
decay
old
plus
Viper.
the molly combo. Like, she's also one of the only ones that has that. Cool...
synergistic. Like, everything just works together. Imagine the old mollies as well, when they used to be like super long and did more damage.
Kill you, because now you can actually just like sit in a corner and tank an entire molly, which is like maybe one downside to them, but it applies vulnerable too. Like, they should probably take that away, to be honest. Like,
I mean, it's just crazy, isn't it? When you start like, and I remember doing this on stream, like early in the off season, I think maybe after champs or whatever. This is when I was kind of really thinking about like starting to formulate the ideas of like just how broken Viper was, and I started explaining it on stream, and I just remember like some people commenting like, oh my god, I never thought about that before. That when you start listing all the different things Viper can do, and you just start like thinking about every situation that she can be like useful to you, you just realize like it's just like just so broken, I guess. And like, and it's just, and to me, and this is why I love Fantasy United as well, by the way, because I did a video about them playing on Acend with Viper. Because they had a very interesting Viper wall, and we've seen some tier 1 teams play like Viper on Acend. Cloud9 did it, and PaperRex do it, and whatever. And PaperRex are a bit of a special case, so I'll kind of let them off because their playstyle's so different. But like the wall goes from from like A across to like the box on the right hand side of the site, on towards the A site. So it goes from A main to like midway up the A site, and it was funny because literally the day before I saw that VOD, I was on stream talking about like I'd been thinking about doing a wall that was somewhat similar to that and how it might be really good. And so when I saw Fantasy United doing it, I was like, they get it. Like they get it that wall, just the mere presence of it means that your opponents can't do the A main one way. And it's like, well, that's the only way that most people know how to defend A.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like it really changes how you have to think about the map once a Viper's introduced to it.
And I watched that VOD of Fantasy United playing against their opponents, and their opponents had no idea. They tried everything to try and defend A, and they had just no idea. They tried like at first they put the one way up, and then it was like there was a round where the Viper just put the wall up, walked past it. And they're like, oh, that doesn't work. So they stopped doing the one way. But then by stop doing the one way, that means we just take A main for free every single round. Like you're just not there. So then they tried pushing through it, and that didn't work because you're pushing through a Viper wall. And then they tried like putting utility in the little like Killjoy utility in the little corner, like on the actual site, hoping that would see it. But then the Viper just walked up and destroyed the Killjoy utility. Like like everything they did, none of it worked. And you could just see their opponents just being like, I could just imagine like they took, I think, both timeouts as well of their coach, like just being like, what do we do? Just like what on earth do we do? And you could just tell like they didn't know.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so strong about Viper is that like there's just certain things where, I mean, it's like on Haven as well. Like the way you defended that map on Haven was that you got one person set up on A with an op, looking down there, and that's how and then you had 4 people for the rest of the map. But the like Viper wall that's come about now, like, doesn't let you do that.
Yeah, now it's you put the Killjoy turret for short, and the Killjoy has to play like retake on A basically.
Yeah, so A site's just free, but then you can't play retake A because Viper is so good in the post plant. Like like it doesn't make any sense. Like it just none of it works.
yeah. So I mean, and we obviously can't talk about this forever, but there's still a lot more to talk about. So let's keep going for at least another few minutes, because basically, like, as far as the meta impact that she has, it's not just that she changes the maps, but it forces you to do other things as far as the agents that you pick. And it's funny, I actually got into a flaming war with a teammate in ranked recently because they were hovering Omen for like the entirety of the picking phase, and I was like, oh good, they're gonna pick Omen, I can pick Viper, because I think it was like Breeze or some map where double smokes is really important. No, it was Lotus. And I'm like, okay, I'll just pick Viper because Viper's fucking awesome, and they're hovering Omen. Finally I get to play Viper with another smokes, but they hadn't locked it in yet. It went down to 0. I picked Viper and they insta switched to Raze, and now we had solo smoke on Lotus of Viper, and I was like, dude, can you please just have locked in Omen? Because now I have to play solo smoke Viper, which is awful. It's terrible. It is terrible. And then really they flamed me for my walls, being like not up or not down at a certain point, and I was like, bro, like you actually fucked our entire team by making me play
so hard. You literally nerfed the entire game so hard.
But anyway, so like the impact that she has on the meta is that we're essentially permanently stuck in a double smokes meta at this point, because like you said, you essentially have to play double smokes when you're playing a Viper, because Viper is a smokes agent, but only for like half of the map, and you can't rely on her to do the other site. And so you have to have another smokes agent to allow you to execute on the other site. And then if you're playing double smokes, then that takes away a slot from probably a duelist at this point, and you probably have to have at least one flash agent, because otherwise you're not utilizing smokes as effectively as you could be. So that's why we're stuck in this space where we have one duelist usually, which is going to be the Raze or the Jet, because you need a choke point breaker most of the time. You have to have a smokes agent, which is going to be a Sky in almost every map, because you still need a drone, quote unquote, and you can't play the Sova because there's no flashes on the Sova, even though Sova is still a good agent. You have to have the dog drone, and Fade's utility is just trash in general. I think Fade might be the worst agent in the game, basically, at this point, as far as like her power level.
This is our big disagreement. I don't
she
think
is
Fade
really
is that bad.
bad. She's really
you
bad.
hate Fade. I don't think she's that bad, but
well, anyway, so
I don't think she's good. I just think she's like in the okay, like she's whatever.
You have to play a drone agent in a lot of maps, so you pick the Sky.
Deadlock is the worst agent in the game.
You get that might be true. You get the Sky flashes, so now you have a flash agent, and then you probably have to have a Sentinel because there's this fucking Viper wall obscuring half of your screen every round. So you have to have something watching one of your choke points passively in case the Viper walks through it. So you have to have a Sentinel, which is going to be a Killjoy on most maps, sometimes a Cypher now, very occasionally a Chamber, and that basically dictates. One agent has dictated what the entire meta is, at least how most people are thinking about the maps. And I've made it my mission in Collegiate to figure out how to play against Viper, because there are tools. There are tools.
This is a big, and I made a whole video about this as well. That, like, again, people to me are a bit like they monkey see, monkey do, right? Yeah. Like I saw a video of a team playing this comp, it worked. Oh, let's just steal everything they did, right? And for me, like, you should probably like, and again, I don't think I think that there is still probably a decent portion of tier 1 pros and players and coaches and teams who maybe don't, I would say haven't realized this yet. They might say that they just disagree or they don't think the same. I would say they just haven't realized it yet. But about how strong Viper is, and so they're not thinking about like, well, how do you counter that, right? Because certain agents are better at, like, dealing with this than others, and I made a whole video about this, about how, like, an agent like Yoru, and we are
really
seeing this
good
slightly,
against Viper,
is probably doing decently better, and has synergies with Viper where you can flash through your own wall and stuff as well. Like, there's or like having more smokes means that Yoru can more safely TP into an area more likely because they can't see him. So there's like other agents, or like a KO to suppress a Viper or whatever, right? And again, flashing through smokes, pretty good. That's just something that teams aren't doing enough of, I guess. That this makes sense that you would do this with a Viper, like whether you're playing with it or against it. And I made a video about how Killjoy on Haven against Viper, or even with Viper on your team, like, you're not, like, if you're sitting Killjoy on A, that's not like, that's your Killjoy setups on A aren't that good. Like, they just aren't.
It's sort of like a band-aid fix for the Viper.
Yeah, your Viper can just walk up short and destroy any Killjoy turret or alarm bot that's there, right? If you're just playing passive on A all the time, as I said, like, playing retake A against Vipers isn't good anyway. So just seeing your Killjoy on A the whole time doesn't make that much sense, right? Like, if you're gonna do that, as I said in that video, you might as well play Cypher for like kill Cypher trips. At least they might get a kill. At least you might be in a 5v4, right? So, and then there's other things as well, like the default Killjoy attack turret being blocked off, but now by like walls that the teams are doing as well, so you can just walk up mid anyway and just ignore the turret. Like this is just people not adjusting to stuff that's like, really should just take one game. It should happen to you once, and you should realize like, oh, this doesn't work, and so we just don't do that anymore, right? Like, but instead, it feels like it takes everyone like a bit, like it takes a top team to like have it happen to them, and then they change their ideas for everyone else to be like, oh yeah,
right,
of course.
And actually, a really interesting thing is, so I've been cooking this Haven comp. I don't know if I ever showed it to you, but it's the one that I'm running with these collegiate players now, and I think it's the best comp in the game on Haven personally. Just from like a purely theoretical standpoint, and it's a no duelist comp because there's just no room for a duelist on the comp. And the reason I got to this comp was actually because I watched Team Liquid play against Loud's Harbor Viper comp on Haven.
Nemesis.
And for all the terrible stuff that they did last year and all of like the mistakes that they made as a team, they did do one thing correctly that I saw that inspired me basically, which was they got plowed by the Viper comp, and
Yeah.
then they switched off the Sova to a Sky. They kept the Breach. So they had Breach Sky as their comp on Haven. So they still had the stun to stop the walk down short, but then they had a flash agent as well, and they were aggressively using the dog to contest every time the wall would go up, and they still played aggressively on A, but they had the ability to do that because they were still playing the Breach. Whereas most teams, when they go to the Harbor Viper comp or the Viper Omen on Haven, then they just play the solo Sky, so their fighting for A is really bad too, and they basically just rely on the Viper wall to walk up, and it becomes like this weird, like really poor attack side Haven all of a sudden. And so I took that and I was like, okay, you must play Breach still. You have to play the Sky because the Sova doesn't work. What if you also add in a KO, more flashes, and suppression, and more information? So now you have 3 flash agents, so your attack side is insane. You're really good at fighting against the wall because you have 2 agents that can pop flash through. You have 2 pieces of info, or you have a lot of info initiator utility, and you can just turn off Viper's wall every time they want to use it. And honestly, like, it just makes sense to me. Like,
well, you're slowly morphing into what I've
so then, because it's a 3-site map, you don't need a duelist to break the choke point because you should be able to just hit a site with a bunch of flashes. And so you just play Omen, KO, Breach, Sky, and a Killjoy. And the Killjoy should probably be something else now that I'm thinking about it more, but the Killjoy works pretty well. So you end up with this really, really insanely fighting comp, and then you also have to just shift how you're thinking about it, because what's one thing that Viper's really bad at? It's retaking. Viper is trash at retaking, especially if you hit the site where she doesn't have her utility. So then you just fight on site with your flashes. There's ways to beat Viper. There's ways to beat Viper. Like back when Viper Astra was insane on split, you know how teams beat that? With double dive. That's why double dive is popular now, is because people were like, fuck your Viper utility. We're just going to go through it and over it as fast as possible.
Yeah. And I think, well, that's the thing. I think, Viper is very good against like normal ways of playing.
Normal Valorant, yeah.
If you want to play normal Valorant, then you're in for a really bad time. But I think you have to be willing to go like extreme with it. You have to be willing to say like, we're just going to play a different style. And look, one thing that is like a constant fly in the ointment of like the way most people approach this game is that one of the most successful teams in the game, PaperRex, play a fucking completely different game.
Thank God that they exist, dude. Like, because I legitimately think that if Viper does become meta on every map, you have to start going all in against teams that are playing Viper and play like Phoenix, KO, Sky, like no Sentinel, and just literally
crazy.
run it down every single round on defense, and then your attack side is really good. Like,
I agree. I mean, I secretly like this is gonna be my hot take. Maybe we can end it here. I've kind of always had the thought like, what if the like GOATs meta of this game is just like 1 controller with Viper and then 3 initiators, and we get info, we have flashes, we just play around the map. We have more utility than everyone else because between Viper and then the initiators, you're just getting more refreshable util over and over again, and you just make it work. And that's that's where the game really is. And even if someone dies in the comp, like it doesn't matter because you're still gonna have some level of you still have some level of smokes, you still have some level of initiation no matter what. Like you can play 4v4s better. And you just go from there. And that's how you win. And instead of having a dive agent, what if to beat choke points, we just stop them from existing. We just stop them from existing with Viper, and just if someone is there, you just bombard them with initiator utility until they just a sitting duck.
Or you play Yoru on every map, you teleport past all of the Sentinel, all the Viper utility.
Yes.
You have flashes to go through, and you follow that up with 3 more duelists and a smoker.
Or you play quadruple duelist.
You play
Talon, we're on to something this entire time.
Omen, Neon for smokes. Jet, Omen, Neon, Yoru, and Raze. And you just hyper dive every site.
Yeah, and you just don't play defense.
Yep.
You win 12-0 on attack, you win pistol round, and then you go home.
Pistol round.
And if you lose that pistol round, you just forfeit.
Yep.
Well, there you go. That's Valorant Future right there. Valorant Future 101. Quadruple duelist.
We'll see. I mean,
imagine.
There better be some innovation in VCT. And speaking of VCT, next episode we're gonna rank every single team in each of their leagues. So
I mean, EG don't have a team. They might not be a team. Where do we rank them?
You're really just trying to get me to drop one more F-bomb at EG before we end this episode. I'm not
going
to do it. I'm not going to do it.
Fine.
Fuck
well,
EG.
Then goodbye.
What do we do? Win! How do we do it? Fight! Who are we? Acend!